Hi people, here I am today to show you a new tutorial that will include all the functionalities of Flare in one single tutorial. As we have developed Flare for 2 years, I think, here I just want to make all the things in one single video. So all the functionalities are explained here. There will be chapters, and so you will find what you're looking for, I hope. Let's start with this. I'm working in 283.12, that it's quite old, but it should be more stable. You can work with 290, 91, 92, 90 with each version of Blender that you want. But you have to know that other version than this one could be more unstable. They need to find more bugs on them. And so this is what I prefer to use. So let's start with the installation of Flare. You have to go into Preferences, you have to go into Add-ons, and then you have to install and select your Flare. This is the last version that you're going to find on the stores. There are minor bug fixes, but we will talk about them in a second time. And so double click on this and Flare is installed. Now you have to look for Flare into all this list, or you have to write Flare here and you have to activate Flare so that Flare will appear on this tab menu. How to create your first Flare? It's very easy. You have to select a camera here because you could have more than one camera. So now select the camera, that we have only this camera, and then you have to select the light, or it could be another object, an empty, that you want to be the source of the flare. You have to choose which kind of flare type you would like to assign to this light. I choose this one, and then you have to click this plus button. He will make the rest. I'm in EV. If I go into my camera, clicking 0 on the keyboard, and then I will move the camera, I'll see the flare coming out from this light source. So we have to hide all of this, and I just turn down the background so that is black and is more visible, the flare. So it's very simple. If the light source goes out from our side, the flare became invisible, and then it gets more visible when the light source is into our view. Here are some value that you can change. This is called focal length. In reality, is not a real focal length, but is something that make more distance between the ghosts and the camera. It's like a compensation of your focal length. In some flare, it works better than in other flares. But if you have trouble with your flares, you can try to adjust their dimension using this slider. So it's not a focal length. Okay, this is important, but it's a compensation of focal length. So with some flare, could be that you have some mistakes, some compenetration between the flare and the object near to the camera. You could try to move this slider and to reach a solution. This is the global scale. If I turn up this, all the elements of the flare will become bigger. If I turn down, they will smaller. This is the global emission. If I turn up this value, all the light emitted by the flare became more and more visible. You have to use this kind of emission when you have a very lighted scene. Now we have the black, so it's not really useful. But if you have a scene with a background like this, you would like to give more power to your flare. As you can see now, it stops at 1, but every value that you find here could be forced. If you write here 5, it becomes 5, 10 will be 10, okay? So you can go beyond our suggested values. The global color influence, each flares come with a color. This is orange, this is green, this is blue. If you want to change this global color, you can try to modify this color. So this flare could be red, okay? And I will increase here the value of this red. But this is a way to change the color if you want a color more similar to your light source. This kind of value has to be improved in the future because we have some limitation now, but it can be useful anyway. The glow scale modifies only the glow. This is the glow all around your light source. You can make it bigger or smaller. This is the purpose, and you can make it brighter or darker. Here is the streak. The streak is these horizontal lines that is drawn by the flare. I would like to change the flare, sorry. I remove this flare and I take another one. Here the streaks is vertical, okay? And here's the emission of the streak, and here is the dimension. You can see when you go out of the camera side, the streaks is still there as it should be. This is the dimension of the sunbeams. So bigger sunbeams, they stay inside also when the sun is out of sight. They will move. As you can see, they are slightly moving to simulate more realism. And you can have more sunbeams. This is the number of the sunbeams, or less sunbeams. Okay. And you can choose also to have more brighter or darker sunbeams, okay, with this value. The ghosts are these elements that are projected by the light source into the lens of your camera. You can choose their scale, you can choose their number here, more or less, and you can choose the emission value, so that they will be brighter or darker. Then there is this dirt that you can add on your lens just to simulate the dirt. The values are a little bit strange because in the first numbers you will find the quantity that you need. If you go up, the dirt become too visible, so use lower values. And then there is this obstacle occlusion that at 1 it means that the flare is visible, at 0 the flare disappears. This will be very useful to make keyframes when you want to make the flare disappear behind an obstacle. The problem may be visible when you take this cube, bring this cube here, and I will move the camera. When I put the cube here, the flare should disappear, but it doesn't disappear. Why? Because with this version of Flared, we have to set manually the obstacle occlusion slider to make the flare disappear. It's not hard. We work to an automated version of doing this, but now I want to show you how to make your flare disappear behind an obstacle. So we have to move the camera to make this into this scene. Maybe that we start here. I will add a keyframe location to the camera here, and I go to 50 frames and move the camera here so that the flare should disappear behind the cube, and make another location to the camera. Okay, so now if I set play, it happens that the flare should disappear, but it doesn't disappear. Let's assign a shader to the cube so that it will be brighter. Okay, now we can see it because an emission. Okay, here the flare is completely visible, but at this point he would start to disappear because the cube is going on the light source. So here I will set a keyframe. I go here with the mouse and I press I on the keyboard so that a keyframe will be put automatically here. Then I go on with these frames. Here the light source is completely out of sight, so I will turn this value to 0 and I will press I here. So now if I move back, I will see the flare disappearing in a convincing way, because in reality flares do this kind of slight disappearing in 2 or 3 frames. Okay, so remove this, hide this, and play this animation. This is a convincing effect. Then you can choose to make something different because you don't like the flare to disappear in this way, and so you would like to move the slider in another way. You can do it because you okay, this is not realistic because you can see the flare passing through our cube. So at this point it should be at 0 already. Open another editor and I will move to dope sheet. Okay, so now we are in the dope sheet. If we deactivate this, we will see all the keyframes that we have on the dope sheet. This is a camera keyframe and this is a camera keyframe too, and those are the 2 keyframes that I assigned to this slider. So I can just pressing G on the keyboard and move this second point so that the flare will disappear 1 frame earlier. Okay, this is more realistic. I like this. Okay, we are working to a way to make this automation, but for now we have to do this manually. Each parameter can have keyframes. Have you seen now added some keyframe to these parameters? But if you like to move the ghost scale, I don't know why, but maybe you have this need, you could add a keyframe here, pressing I, and then move to another frame and make your ghost scale smaller, like this. If I play now, this is what happened. Maybe that you would need to make some of this tweaking to the slider in animation just to simulate when the lens make a zoom. When the lens zoom in, it happened that all the scale grows up, the scale of the flare, the global scale, or down when you zoom out. This could be useful. And at the same time, when the flare goes up, the global emission should go down. This is something that you can do manually working with keyframes. There are other times in which you could find unuseful to have ghosts, for example, because you don't need them into your scene. You just want to have a good glow and sunbeam in your light. Let's change again the type of flare. So pressing this one, I will remove my flare, and selecting the light and selecting the kind of flare, I can assign another flare to our scene. Just wait the time to put into the GPU. Okay. This is another type of flare. As I said, maybe that you want to remove the ghosts. So I go to ghost emission and turn them to 0. So now I just have the sunbeams, the streak, the glow, but not the ghosts. Maybe that you need this in some scene. Or you could need the opposite. You could need to have no glow, no streaks, no sunbeams, but you could have ghosts. In this flare, ghosts are strange, but maybe you just need this kind of effect without having other effects. Remember that you can modify the flare as you like. You could also have multiple flares. Now we've worked with only one flare, but maybe that in your scene you need more than one flare. So remove this one, clicking here, activate the space. Here is light. I will duplicate this light again and again and again and again. So light 1 could have this kind of flare. Light 2 could have another type of flare, this one. Light 3 could have another type of flare too, this one, and light 4, another one too, this one. And now we have this multiple flare scene. It's not a problem to manage as flare as your GPU will be able to manage. When you have multiple flares, it could be hard sometimes to understand which flare am I modifying when I go there. So now I can select the flare that I want to modify by clicking here, and it will select the relative flare here in the panel of flared, or I can click directly here. When I click here, I will see the highlight of the flare here, okay? And so you know which flare are you modifying. If I want to modify this one, I just click on it and then I can modify it. Think about this situation. So I will leave this flare there as is, and I will remove. I want to make all the flares similar, the same type of flare. So here, here, and here I will add this kind of flare so that we have only octagonal flares on each light. And this is very important. I want to change some custom parameter here. Just take a look at what happened as this flare. Maybe I want to turn down the glow. Okay. So I don't want the glow, I just want something scale, and I just want to turn down the dirt because I don't want the dirt. So I want to reduce the ghost scale too, in this way, and I want to apply all of these modifications to the other flares. I don't want to make by hand one by one. There are two ways to do this. The first way is to save your preset, but we will talk about this later. The other way is to use those functions that we have here in this menu. So to do this, we have to know what does it mean to have a selected flare, what is a selection, and what is an active flare. So this is the active flare. The one that I will call here, that is highlighted here, is the active one. And those are the selected flare, okay? This is the correct way in which we can do now a simple thing. I will click on this flare, that is this one, and I will select all the other flare, and then I will make copy setting from active to select, and this is what we wanted to do. So it copied from this one to the other that I have selected there, and so I applied the modifications to all the other flare just with one click. Now let's talk about the presets. Presets are the way you can save your custom modifications that you make here. So now I have an octagonal flare, that is this one, assigned to the first light, and I just make some modification to the color. I'll do this, then I modify the glow scale to this, the streak scale to this, and also the ghost emission to this, and also the ghost scale like this, and more ghosts like this. Okay, I want to store this preset because I like it and I want to use it on another flare now or tomorrow or the next year. So I just have to click on this plus button that will add a preset here. I can give a name. OCT is for octagonal. As you can see, each flare has strings here that will make it recognizable using also 3-digit. And so now I call this green. Okay, in this way I can go on modifying it and checking if I like another solution. And then, no, I don't like this, I want to recall the preset that I made. It's easy because I go here, click here, and then the preset is applied. When I select it, it's applied. I've lost in this way the last configuration that I've done. You can use the undo command if you want to come back. But this way, it's a way to save your presets in a very easy way. So now I go there and I will add another octagonal flare to this other light, and I want to make this, and this is the way I can use the same configuration for more than one flare. Don't make confusion using presets of different kind of templates because the result could be very strange. Because if you want, you can go there, add a completely different preset, this one, and add it here. And then I can recall the same preset that I've made for the octagonal flare. I can do it, but it's weird. The result, it's not what we want. We have to use the preset for the kind of flare that it's explained here, octagonal. Okay, if you want to remove the preset, just select it and click on this minus button, and you will remove the preset forever. So remember that you can use the presets as you like. Now we can talk about multiple cameras. Flares can work with more than one camera, but you have to know how to do it, because if you go into a camera and if you look at the camera that is projecting its flares into it, you will see the flare all around the camera. That is not what we want to see. So now I have created this scene with the first camera, that is the selected one now, with 3 flares, and other 2 cameras into the scene that we want to animate. We want to move from this camera to this one, and from this one to the other one. So the first things we have to do is to mark the camera. So now I can bind this camera, this one I want, bind camera mark. Okay, so now this is the active camera. I go to frame 20 and I set this camera as the active camera. So I will move to camera 2, and at the frame 40 I will be in this camera. Camera 3, bind camera to markers. Okay, now let's go into the camera view, pressing 0 on the keyboard, and let's see what's happening. Going back to the first camera, I press play. This is the second camera, and this is the third camera. We have a problem because, as we can see, a flare is not synchronized with the camera that we have set it. Why this happens? It's very easy. There is just one click that you need to do, and it's here. If you click for this flare here, it will follow the active camera. If you click here, it will follow the active camera too, and this one too. You can choose which flare will follow the camera or not. So now let's do it again. Let's check what happens, and the second camera is now okay, and the third camera is now okay. So this is what you need to do when you work with multiple cameras and you want your flare to be synchronized to your multiple cameras. If you go out of the camera view here, you can see what happens. This is what happens. The flare changed the camera. Now we are here again and we will talk about this panel, the extra menu panel. Here you can find some function that could be useful when you have a lot of flares in the same scene to manage. So here we have 3 flared, and here remember what is a selected flare and what is an active flare. This is the active flare, this is the selected flare. Here you can do copy settings from active to select that we already know. You can delete the selected flare. So if I click this and I delete selected, this flare will be deleted. Now undo. If I select 2 flares, delete selected, the 2 flares will be deleted. Okay, delete not select is the opposite. We have 2 selected flare and now it will delete the active. Now delete all. It's easy because it will delete all our flares. Undo. Then we have a select all that will select all the flare, select none that will deselect all the flare, or when you have this, we have the invert selection. This extra menu will have another option when you will work in cycles, but we will see this when we'll talk about cycles. Now I want to show you one more control that you can have on your flares. This is something that goes beyond our graphic interface and is something that could use a very skilled user that will modify by hand other parameters that you don't have here of his flare. So now let's go here, move a little in this way. Take a look. When we add a flare, the add-on will add a collection, all the elements of the flare inside that are a lot of elements. If you don't have these icons here, you'll have to choose here what you want to make visible, because they need you if you want to modify your flares. As you can see now, you cannot choose to modify these elements. You cannot click on them as you can do with other polygon into Blender because the selection is now disabled. If you enable the selection, now you will be able to select a lot of other elements of the flare that by default are not selectable. They are not selectable because we don't want you to make difficult things that it will be hard to come back. So now you can do whatever you want here, but you can also break the flare. So do it at your own risk. The elements are selectable, I think. Yes, as you can see, they are selectable. You have to know that some of the elements are generated by particle systems, so they could not be selected manually. This is created by particle systems, and being ghost numbers, those are created by a particle system. So if you remove the particle system, you will be able to see only the element of the flare that are done by hand, and you can select them. And here you can modify their shaders, because here are the shaders. The shaders are complex, are not made with a ratio that will help you to understand what happens here, because they are made for ourselves. I can say this. But if you want to change the size of this element, you can do it pressing S and modify the size. If you want to modify its own shader, you have to know that there are some drivers on the shader. So there are things that you cannot modify because the drivers will force his own value and you cannot do what you want. As you can see, this RGB curve is the intensity of the light of this flare. So if we modify this, we're going to change what happened inside the light of the flare. It's hard now to explain what happens on all the elements of all the flares because they are completely different one from one other. Anyway, you can go here and try to make your own modifications if you want, and at your own risk. But there is a tutorial that goes deep into this. If you want, I will link it in the description. Working with cycles. Here I have this simple scene. There is a cube, there is a light here that have his flare, and there is another light here. Where is it? Here, just to give some light to the red cube. Okay, now I am in the viewport shading material preview, and I switch to cycles. Going to cycle, we'll have a new option here that is move selected flare on a new EV scene. This is very important because if you want to have the flare on your cycle scene, you have to apply this, selecting the flare that you want to move on another EV scene. I'm doing it right now. it will ask for the creation nodes, because we use nodes to composite the EV render flare to the cycle render scene. This is the way for now. We will talk about another way to do it in the future, but there is another chapter for this. So I will choose this option. And if I am already using the compositor with nodes, I have to know this adding nodes now will delete all my node setup. So this is very important to know. If you are working with nodes, don't add composite node. If you don't know what composite nodes are, you can activate this and click OK. And we will see now what happens when we do this. Okay, now it seems that nothing has changed, but if we go to scene here, we can see that we have a second scene that is called EV scene flared. In this scene, there is a duplication of the elements that need to be rendered at the same time, but with another engine, that is EV, because this method will render at the same time in EV the flare and in cycles the scene. You don't have to do anything into this scene. This scene is there and you don't have to touch it. This one, you can still modify your flare, because if you go here and change the scale of the flare and then move here, it made the same changes because the two scenes are connected. So stay in the first scene and render your scene. This is the cube and this is the flare. How they are put all together, if you go to compositing, you can see that there is a scene rendered in cycles and another scene rendered in EV, and then there is a composition node here that will add the two scenes together to go to the composite, the final. If you have a backdrop activated, you can put your viewer node, and if you move this, you will see that you have one more control on your flare, because this factor can change from the maximum, that is the result that you have in the viewport, and can go to 0, just to have one more control with this slider. This is the way to work with cycles. It supports the multi-camera too. Why don't we use cycles directly? Because this is a question that people made. The answer is that thanks to this man, Jean-Christophe Levet, this user that gave us some very useful advice to modify our shaders and to make them compatible with cycles. This way worked, because what he has done was pretty smart, but for now we keep away from this kind of solution, because the problem is that as cycles is a very realistic render engine and simulates the light, if we use our flare, the flare will illuminate the scene, making the reflection and the illumination, because it uses emissive shaders. So it will change your scene in a non-realistic way, because the flares from nature stays into the space of the camera lens, and so they shouldn't illuminate the object in the scene. We will see what we can do in the future. Anyway, thank you to Jean-Christophe Levet for this very important advice, because we will work on it. Okay, and I think that's all about cycles. Thank you. And now, how to use Flare with a real video footage made with your camera or with your smartphone. It's very easy. Let's delete the light. Here we have our camera. Let's put it in 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So now it's here in the center of our scene. Let's add a plane. I suppose we want to work on 16:9 image. So I put 16:9 here. And I will move up my camera, pressing G on the keyboard and Z to go up on this X. Okay, then go in the camera view, pressing 0, and then S and modify the scale of this plane like this. Okay, so that it's completely in camera now and we don't cut any part of the video that we want to assign. This is our object shader. Let's do a new shader. Let's add here a texture input multiple image, and let's port here a video. This is a MP4 video. Okay, I will connect it directly to the material output, removing this principle BSDF, because we don't want our video to take reflections and shadows. We want it to be shadeless in this way. Okay, this video is taken by pexels.com. You can see it here. It's a free footage. There are tons of free videos here that you can download and use for your projects. Now I can see that this video is working at 9020 per 1080, okay, and 24 FPS. So I just want to match these values into Blender just to make the right thing. So this is the dimension, the resolution is correct, and this is the frame rate that is correct, because we could have other frame rates. Different video have different frame rates. So let's match the one that your video has, okay. And so now we go here. We want to work I think 250 frames. Okay, so 250 frames. We have to activate this to make it change here in the preview. Okay, this is very important. We have to modify the color management, because this is super RGB, that is okay. We have to remove this filmic that is very good to use when you work in 3D, but if we use it now, we will change the color of our video. So it's better to do a standard. Okay, so we don't change the video. Can you see that in filmic it changes the lights? In standard it's like as it is, look none. Okay, that is correct. And now if we press 0, we go into the video. So let's play it from the beginning. I don't want to use all the video because it's very long, but I would like to add a lens flare into this video. It could be good. There are different ways to do this. If it were here a moving camera with lights turned on, I surely would use the skill of Blender to track the movement on a scene, so to track the lights of the car, and then I will create my flare using this empty parented to do the movement of the lights. I've done it in another tutorial. I will link it here because it's quite long and I don't want to lose time now in this fast tutorial. So now I will do this work to synchronize my lens flare and my sun to the existing sun in this scene that I think it's right there. I will try to sync it by hand. So what I need, it's an empty object. I can move it where I want. I just want to put it G and Z higher than the picture, a little higher than the picture, like this. Okay, I want to create a lens flare pointing at it, so I have to decide which kind of flare I prefer. Let's try with the hooper, and the camera is selected. I've selected this flare, this empty, that is the origin of the flare, and I will add a lens flare. Now the lens flare is there, is very powerful. I don't think I want all this light, but maybe it's quite good. I just want to change this blue color to something more warmer. Okay, so I will try to move it in this direction. Okay, then there is this flare that is too powerful. I will try to move this focal length to make it go outside of our scene. Okay, I will turn down the glow emission. Okay, so we have less glow here, and what's happening now is that the flare is static and is there, and it's not supposed to be what we want. The movement seems to be at the same velocity. I will try at the end here to move. What the hell? This element. Okay, now it's gone away. It's better. I will try to put this here. That is the position of the sun, I think. Yeah, maybe this one. And with I on the keyboard, I press I and I make a location keyframe. So at this point we have a keyframe of this empty. Then I go back to the beginning and I try to imagine where the sun could be in this moment, because I think it could be something like here. I'm not sure, but let's try it. And I press I again to make a keyframe. Okay, let's play this and see what happened. Remove this. Okay. Okay, there is a problem, because we have to go into our graph editor. Okay, and what's happening now is an automatic um, setting by default in Blender. When we move something, Blender will move the movement, but the movement of this drone, I think it's a drone, it's not moved at the beginning, at the end. It's quite the same movement for all the time. So all the keyframes are selected now, and I have to go here into interpolation mode and set linear. So now the movement is linear, and it could be better in this kind of scene because I think that the original movement is a linear movement. So let's start again. Yes, now it seems to be very synchronized to our picture. Yeah, now I like it. And this is done by hand. That's very easy. This picture with this kind of flare, maybe now it's too strong. Maybe I have to turn down the ghost emission just to make it okay, to make it like this. And also the sunbeams could be. We don't need the sunbeams because there is already an explosion of the sun over there. Maybe we want to add some dirt here just to make it more realistic. I don't know if we need it. I like this streak that go there, but I like it to be more visible. Let's try 3 to the streaks, or maybe we can change the scale to... Yes. Okay. This is a quite fast example. Now we understand that we don't like this kind of flare. We want to change it. Nothing easier. You will remove it in this way. You will remove the flare, and clicking on the empty again, the empty is still there, we can add another kind of flare. Let's try this one. Okay, and here is another kind of effect. In this case too, I'd like to turn down all these colors. Take a look at what happened. Here, where is a lot of light, you quite cannot see the flare, but in this part that is quite dark, the flare is really visible. This happens in reality too. Maybe I will reduce all this explosion because there is already there an effect like this. Maybe that I will turn down these ghosts. Okay. I like something more like this. It's more realistic because it was too strong, too powerful. Anyway, when you've done your job, you can export. If you like, you can export as image sequence. That is better, in my opinion, because if Blender crashes, you don't lose all your rendered elements. But if you want, you can export in a movie format too. Anyway, that's all. I hope this is what you were looking for. Now a little talk about the last update. Now we are in version 1.6.79. This is a minor update that we've done right now. We've solved a problem related to the deletion of corrupted flares. Some users told us that after making different operations, we are not able to reconstruct what they've done, but it could happen that corrupted flare were shown in this list and they couldn't be deleted from this function. They gave an error. So now this is solved. If the flare became corrupted, you can delete it anyway. And then there is another minor bug that happened to a user that was working in a render farm. So he was working with this add-on on multiple machines connected into a LAN, and the paths of the images were manually changed, and so he had some problem and some errors. This is fixed too. And now we can talk about the ideas for the future. You asked us what were we working at in this time. We had a lot of other works to follow in the last months, and we are still in the pandemic, so we are in a hard situation, but I think that this is the same all around the world. Anyway, we are thinking about how to evolve this project, and there are different things we are trying to make. The first is to make an automation to this slider that now help you to hide the light behind an obstacle. We would like to make this automatic. So when the flare goes behind an obstacle, the system will automatically detect that the flare is out of sight, and so we'll turn it down. But you will have a slider in which you could choose the speed of this disappearing, okay? Because there are different speed. It could be high speed or little speed. It depends on the scene. And so you will have the control on the speed. We are very fascinated by the new features of Blender that could work with nodes in a lot of situations, and we are thinking about completely redesign our solution now that Blender offers more control and more flexible solutions. But this is just like a dream at the moment. We will need a lot of time to understand what we can do. It would be perfect if the users could create their own templates. A limit now is the template had to be released by ourselves, and we are slow in making this because it's very complex because of the system that we have designed. So maybe that with another system the user could choose to add elements and or not, and have totally interface control on the creation of their own templates. That will be the goal for the future. We want also to solve an old problem related to scale, because, as you can see now, flare is created into the camera space. As we know, this design of the camera is not the real dimension of a real camera. This is something that helps us to understand where the camera is. But the camera could be smaller or bigger, and it doesn't change anything in what you will see at the end. Now the problem is that if I have an object here really near to the camera, these elements of the flare will disappear behind these objects, and this is a problem that is inside the way we have invented flare. We're looking for a solution to this. Maybe we are near to a solution, because I really don't like this problem. Okay, this is the light with the flare. It's very near to the camera, and this is another light very distant from the camera. Now I will okay, are they inside? Okay, this one, that is the one near, should be here. Okay, I save this preset here, demo. I will go demo. Okay, I will add here another flare similar to this one. I will recall the demo. No, sorry, I didn't add the flare. Okay, now I will use demo here. Okay, so they are the same flare. The problem is that the flare in distance, this one that is distant from the camera, has the same dimension of this one. This is not correct. This flare should be smaller. I don't know if it's something we can achieve reducing this value. Okay, we could do it, but I'd really like to have an automation, an automatic system to make this by default. We've had some contact with the people behind Octane Render, and we will consider to make flare compatible with this render engine. At the moment, we didn't have the time to invest in this direction. We would like to know from you if there is interest in this. So give us your feedback. Let us know if you are interested in Octane Render too. Then there is one more important step. We would like to move all the customers that have bought flared from the www.blenderlensflare.com to the Blendermarket. This is because, as a lot of you has experienced, our website is not so easy to manage, and so sometimes there are problems with the updates and other things. As the Blender market is really strong in this, it would be really useful to move all of you there, so that you can download the latest version when you want, and you won't be anymore dependent on our email with the update that somebody don't receive, and other problems like this. This is something that we are working on from 1 year. Yeah, it more than 1 year, and the Blender market seems to have a difficult situation in managing this. They told us that this could be done, so I really hope that this could be done in this year, because we really need it. I hope to give you news as soon as possible. Here is a preview of a new kind of layer we are working at. It's not finished because we have to do more tweaking, but we are introducing new elements. There is this element that is something like an halo that creates before the sun enters to the scene, and then there is the light too that going outside is getting bigger. It's not as I want it now, but it's something that we are going to do for the future. In reality, when the sun goes out of the camera, I can see it in some Hollywood movies, and this effect depends on the kind of lens that they use. Sometimes maybe that when the light goes on this side, projects for a little time, maybe 2 or 3 frames, a big light into the scene. It's not what I've done now. I wanted to do this, but I wanted to do this kind of effect, but it's not what I achieved now. I'm working more on this to try to do this kind of effect, and then also these streaks that projects and get wider or smaller as the sun, as the light goes to the center of the scene, is something that I want to have, because there are a lot of lenses that creates more and more of these elements. So I'm working on something a little different from you already have now in Flared. I think I will release this new template surely for free, but in a short time. Anyway, thank you again for all your support in this add-on. We are trying to make it better and better and better, and this is only possible because of you. Thank you, and have a good blend.